In the ever-present and ongoing battle between Classic and New World Halo, one thing always comes up. The Spartan abilities make perfect sense because according to the lore, Spartans are these insurmountable badasses who can do all sorts of amazing things, and it happens in the anime. And you can probably tell from the title where I stand on this justification. I'm all for enhanced mobility Halo as its own thing. I'm all for Classic Halo as its own thing. I've said that 1,000 times. I have no horse in that fight. I will play Halo regardless of what it is. But I want to talk a little bit about how not only lore doesn't work for that argument one way or the other, but it also really shouldn't be in multiplayer at all. Because when it's not, 343 does some of their best work. So let's talk about that. So what's up everybody, how's it going? Legundo here, and today we're going to talk about how lore shouldn't matter for multiplayer. So there's two main topics with this. One is the justification or detraction from enhanced mobility. Both people saying it makes sense because Spartans are these amazing badasses and it should not happen anymore because Cortana has the Guardians and has somehow affected the production of Gen 2 armor, which would get rid of thrusters even though somehow retroactively disabling them on everybody's existing armors. Oh my god, please stop. Because while the story of Halo is an intense and complex one, and is one that really deserves its own treatment, campaign is its own thing. I think one of the biggest mistakes that came out of 343 was trying to canonize multiplayer. It started with Halo 4. The multiplayer was called War Games, and it was set aboard the UNSC Infinity through a bunch of different holographic and other simulations. It was also used as a justification for the incoming requisition drops back when they were still the weapon pods that you would have dropped into battle, and also the slightly more arcadey feel of Halo 4 against previous Halos. And this was fine, I guess. There was a couple of cutscenes and voiceovers with Palmer and Lasky introducing you to different multiplayer features, and they definitely really promoted the multiplayer as an integrated part of the story, even though it really wasn't. Not really, anyway. Few tangential connections, but if you wanted to look at the multiplayer connected to the campaign aspect of Halo 4, I'd suggest you take a look at Spartan Ops, where there was an actual story there, and story belonged there. It made sense there. Multiplayer where you're shooting each other in the same arena over and over again, not so much. And the same is true for Halo 5. Warzone at the start of every match says beginning Warzone simulation with Sarah Palmer's voice if you haven't yet replaced her with one of the voices from the Voices of War Rec Pack. It's set as a training simulation for Spartans, and that's used as an explanation as to why certain features of previous Halos are not present and also certain enemies are. At least in the very beginning, up until Attack on Sanctum was finally released, no campaign characters, aside from Warden Eternal, who has a sort of in-story explanation being a mind of 10,000 bodies, none of them were featured in Warzone at all, even though players were trying to find a reason to make it work. You had all sorts of threads on our Halo about how Chief could be a Warzone boss, how insurrectionists, how Governor Sloan could be Warzone bosses or enemies, and the argument for them was, oh, well, the creators are the bad guys now, we need to be practicing against them. And while I can see that making sense in the story, fighting a hologram of an AI who lives only on a computer chip doesn't really make sense for gameplay. And honestly, when you stop trying to make the multiplayer canon and fit into the lore of your world, it actually plays a little bit better. Take a look at Halo Wars 2 and just the sheer amount of dead characters that are back for the multiplayer. You have Sergeant Forge, you have the Halo 1 Arbiter, you have Sergeant freaking Johnson back and fighting in the Halo Wars 2 multiplayer arena. And it's been said that Halo Wars 2 multiplayer is non-canon, which allows an enormous amount of freedom for the characters that they're able to bring back and what they're able to do in the multiplayer. And I think that's the way to go moving forward. Now, Halo was in no way the only game to make their multiplayer canon, or attempt to. I think it also happened with the Call of Duty franchise, and it's happened with a few others as well. And while it seemed to work for a little while, I personally don't think it's the best idea, because it boxes you in and has your story dictate what you can actually do in the multiplayer, and vice versa. Certain encounters, certain enemies, you need to explain away things like respawning. Even something as simple as why are we fighting in this little confined area needs to be hand waved away with some mention of simulation or virtualization, and it's extra fanfare and extra boxes that need to be checked for no real reason. For the longest time, no one cared about why we were fighting each other in multiplayer. We did that because it was multiplayer. I don't need the story motivation of the 72nd Red Spartan I've killed today. I need to know what the score is and who's winning. It's funny, you've actually seen games take the exact opposite route lately. Overwatch, for example, none of its gameplay is canon. And in fact, a majority of its story exists in different animated cinematics, comics, and extended universe materials, and is entirely outside of the gameplay altogether. Because how do you explain the peaceful, loving Zenyatta driving a nuke into an Omnic production facility to destroy all Omnics? Doesn't really make sense if you think about it, so why try to make it make sense? Instead, let the gameplay be gameplay, and let the fun be for fun's sake. This way, if you want to introduce a new character, even somebody from the past who might be dead, who would make a good leader, or somehow just works for a slot that you need filled in your roster, you can do it, and you don't need to worry about justifying that character's presence with their likes, their dislikes, their allegiances, and who they're working with. Halo's story has always been one of its strong suits. Well, almost always been one of its strong suits. Halo 5, as has been beaten to death, was not the strongest story entry ever. We definitely need a stronger and a better one in Halo 6, but personally, I'd be happier if the story existed solely underneath the story tab of the menu, and when we're in multiplayer, we could just focus on the game and having fun. Plus, also, it takes one more bullet out of everybody's arsenal when arguing new versus classic, and I really want that conversation to go away, and it will very soon when Halo 6 and its new mechanics, or lack of new mechanics, are announced. What do you think? Do you think lore should be used as a justification for gameplay or game mechanics, or do you think it exists solely in the campaign narrative portion of the game and should find its way out of multiplayer? Let me know down in the comments, and as always, you know what to do. Like the video if you like it, dislike it if you hated it, subscribe for some more Halo news and gaming news and all sorts of news and analysis here on the channel, and I'll talk to you next time.